it's Seraphina. Tonight I have something a little different for you. A light-hearted comedic story that centers around a family member of mine who managed to turn a perfectly normal day into a whirlwind of chaos. If you're looking for something to relax to, but also want a bit of laughter along the way, this is the story for you. Before we begin, I'd like to remind you to subscribe and follow if you haven't already. I love sharing these funny and reflective stories with you, and your support means so much to me. Now, let's take a deep breath together, settle in, and dive into this hilarious tale. The story is about my uncle, Greg. Uncle Greg has always been a bit, let's say, accident-prone. It wasn't that he was clumsy, per se, but wherever he went, chaos seemed to follow. He had a knack for being in the wrong place at the wrong time, but also somehow managing to come out unscathed, often with a ridiculous story to tell. The day that still stands out to me happened a few years ago. Uncle Greg had recently been assigned as head of security for a local charity event. A pretty big responsibility, considering Greg's track record with anything involving, well, responsibility. The event was meant to be a quiet affair, fundraising for a children's hospital with a small gathering of donors, some local officials, and even a couple of minor celebrities. It was a straightforward job, make sure everyone was safe, keep things calm, and avoid any disruptions. But with Uncle Greg, nothing ever stays straightforward for long. As the evening began, everything seemed to be going smoothly. Greg was stationed near the entrance, greeting guests as they arrived. He was wearing a dark suit, trying to look as professional as possible. But you could tell there was a certain nervous energy to him, like he was waiting for something to go wrong, because with him, it always did. The first sign of trouble came when one of the caterers tripped over a wire, sending a tray of hors d'oeuvres flying through the air. In typical Greg fashion, he tried to catch the tray, only to knock over a nearby display of carefully arranged champagne glasses. There was a loud crash, and everyone in the room turned to look. For a moment, you could see the panic in Greg's eyes, but then, as if on autopilot, he immediately jumped into action, grabbing napkins and desperately trying to clean up the mess. The problem was, in his haste, he didn't realize that his foot had tangled in the wire that had caused the initial disaster. As he turned to pick up the glasses, the wire yanked a decorative plant from its pedestal, which then tumbled onto a table full of desserts. Within seconds, a small catastrophe had unfolded, and Greg was at the center of it all, trying to fix things while simultaneously making them worse. But that wasn't the end of it. Things got weirder when a strange man appeared at the event. He was tall, with a trench coat and sunglasses, indoors, mind you, and he seemed to be lurking around the back of the room. Something about him looked suspicious, but it wasn't clear what he was up to. Uncle Greg, trying to recover from the earlier fiasco, spotted the man and, feeling responsible for security, decided to investigate. Without thinking, Greg walked up to the man and in his most official voice asked, "Can I help you with something?" The man, startled by Greg's sudden appearance, stammered something about being a special guest and quickly made his way toward the kitchen. Of course, Uncle Greg, determined to do his job, followed him right into the middle of the kitchen staff, who were rushing around preparing the next course. realize it at the time, but in his eagerness to chase down the suspicious man, he knocked over a stack of plates, sending them crashing to the floor. Chaos erupted in the kitchen. The chefs were yelling. The kitchen staff were trying to avoid the broken glass. And amidst it all, Craig was frantically apologizing while still trying to keep an eye on the man in the trench coat, who had somehow slipped out of sight. It was at this moment that Uncle Craig made the decision to take things to the next level. Convinced that the man was up to no good, Craig grabbed the nearest thing he could find, a broom, and began searching the venue as if he were on some sort of detective mission. Guests, unaware of what was happening, watched in confusion as Craig moved through the crowd, broom in hand, searching for the mysterious man. What Craig didn't know was that the suspicious man was actually a magician, hired as part of the evening's entertainment. He was there to perform a surprise magic show for the guests. When Craig finally found him, he burst into the room just as the magician was about to pull a rabbit out of his hat. In a moment of pure reflex, Craig pointed the broom at the magician and shouted, "Stop right there." The magician, taken aback, dropped the hat, and instead of a rabbit, a flurry of doves flew out, startling everyone in the room. The guests erupted into laughter, thinking it was part of the show, but Craig, still holding the broom like some sort of absurd security weapon, stood frozen, completely confused about what had just happened. The night culminated in the most ridiculous misunderstanding of all. After the doves, Craig finally realized that the man he had been chasing was just part of the entertainment. Embarrassed but trying to play it cool, he attempted to quietly slip out of the room. However, in true Uncle Craig fashion, he bumped into a cart carrying the charity auction items, sending an antique vase toppling to the floor. The vase shattered into 1,000,000 pieces, and for a moment the entire room went silent. Craig, wide-eyed and mortified, slowly turned to face the crowd, his face turning red. Before anyone could say anything, Craig simply muttered, "I'll just go now," and hurried out of the room. Despite the chaos Craig caused, no one could stay mad at him for long. The guests found the entire sequence of events hilarious, and by the end of the night, they were all laughing and telling stories about how Craig had unintentionally become the star of the evening. The event raised a record amount of donations, and the auction continued with a replacement vase, much to Craig's relief. In the end, Uncle Craig's antics became the stuff of legend in our family. To this day, we still joke about how he single-handedly turned a quiet charity event into a comedy show. He might not be the most graceful person, but Craig's heart is always in the right place, and somehow he always manages to make things work out, even if it's in the most unexpected ways. Take a deep breath in and let it out. Thank you for spending this time with me tonight and for listening to Uncle Craig's story. It's a reminder that sometimes, even when things go completely off the rails, there's still humor and joy to be found in the chaos. Life doesn't always go according to plan, but those are often the moments that make the best stories. Until next time, sweet dreams, lovely friend. Good night, Seraphina.